what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with a Regular Dude. Today I'm going to be talking about Reckless by Lauren Roberts. But before we get into all of that, I got to give a quick shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretters, my top tier supporters on Patreon, Laughing Cat Dog, JJ Valdez, and Peggy Lou Who. Thank you so much for your support. You are helping to ensure I'm able to create content and put it out as frequently as possible. If you also want to help support the channel and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/don'tfret_. If not, no worries, but please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Okay, so this book is a sequel to Powerless. It is the second in a trilogy. The third one isn't out yet. I've done a video on Powerless as well, and you don't need to have watched my video to watch this one, but if you want to, I will put a link in the description down below. But basically, the world of Powerless is kind of like reverse X-Men, but making magic. Kingdom of Ilya, there was like a plague that gave everybody weird hair colors and superpowers. And it's kind of like a superpower-based society. Like if you don't have powers, you're called an ordinary, which is like a slur for some reason. And the king says that you have a disease that's weakening the powers of the elites around you. So the story of Powerless kind of focuses on two main characters. One is a young woman named Peyton, who is an ordinary. She's an orphan living on the streets, living in the slums. She's an orphan because her mother died in childbirth and her father was murdered by the king. She gets by stealing from other people living in the slums, and she avoids discovery as an ordinary by pretending to be a psychic. She's very perceptive and good at profiling, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, but without the hat, or Watson. You know what? She's kind of nothing like Sherlock Holmes. Anyways, one day Peyton pickpockets a noble who turns out to be the crown prince and also the future enforcer. And the enforcer is like the king's right-hand assassin. His job is to like hunt down ordinaries and, you know what I'm saying? So while this prince, his name is Kai, is on a mission in Peyton's like hometown or whatever, he's attacked in the streets and Peyton saves his life. They have this immediate like rivalrous and very sexually charged banter. The tension is so palpable and thick you could cut it with a knife and spread it on toast. And then like a few days later, Peyton is mysteriously entered into the trials. The trials are this book's version of the Hunger Games or Light Lark, but it doesn't really have a point to it except like being in service to the plot, meaning like the purpose of the trials is never fully explained. It's established that Kai, the future enforcer, needs to win in order to be taken seriously as the enforcer, but like why the other contestants are competing was never clear. So Peyton doesn't really have a choice but to compete or, you know, face the wrath of the king or something like that. So she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna survive this thing. And then later on, she's like, nah, fuck that. I'm gonna win this thing. She ends up being secretly recruited by a resistance that was actually started by her late father. It's comprised of ordinaries and mundanes, which are people who have like less spectacular superpowers, you know. They don't be shooting fireballs and making clones of themselves or turning into wolves or nothing. And this little resistance is called the Resistance. They give Peyton a mission to get close to the heir to the throne, Kai's older brother Kit, so that she can steal a key. Then they can take over the final event of the trials, reveal their existence to the Kingdom of Ilya, and prove that they're not a threat to the elites, and they can just live in peace. But things go sideways, shit hits the fan, and the king, who's always known who Peyton is and knows that she's ordinary, tries to kill her, and then she kills him, and Kit and Kai feel betrayed and heartbroken. Kit's the new king, and he goes from being like a really nice guy to a real bad guy, and then Kai has to go track her down, and then that's Powerless. And Reckless just kind of picks up right after that. So let's just get right into it. I'll start with a plot summary, and then I'll move on to my analysis after that. So if you want a more general review, you don't want like big plot spoilers or anything like that, just go down to the description down below, check the time codes so you can skip ahead. So now I'm getting into the plot summary. This is the part of the video where I go through the notes that I took down while I was reading the book. Okay, so the prologue. It's his birthday, I think, and he goes to the castle kitchen and visits the cook lady. He tells her that he's got his first mission as the enforcer, like officially, and he visits a tree with a sticky bun he got from the kitchen and wishes A a happy birthday. I don't remember who A is. Whoops. Maybe this is a new character being retconned in. Yes, that's what happened. And chapter 1 is from Peyton's perspective. My blood is only useful if I can start... There's a typo in my notes. My blood is only useful if it can stay inside my body. My mind is only useful if it can manage to not get lost. My heart is only useful if it can manage to not get broken. Well, seems I've become utterly useless then. Riveting stuff. So Peyton's on the run. I have a note that says, I forgot how jarring this present tense first person prose was. She's hiding in her childhood home when Kai shows up, and she hides in the chimney and overhears him express trepidations about killing her because he loves her. Then he burns her house down. Because that's what you do when you love somebody. I just want to make it real clear, fellas, that is not actual dating advice. If you like a woman, don't burn her house down. Just be real honest and clear with her about your intentions, and maybe ask her out on a date. I don't know. I've been in a relationship for like 13 years. I don't know how dating works nowadays. Chapter 2 is Kai's perspective. He sees Peyton making an escape from the burning house, and he chases her. Chapter 3, Peyton's perspective. Peyton thinks about killing Kai, but she just can't do it because she sees him being compassionate, and he buries a guard that she killed. And then this line stuck out to me. The stars are flirtatious things winking in the darkness, which is some pretty Rupi Kaur type poetry. I don't think I like it, but it's not bad. So then Peyton decides to cross the Scorches, which is like a desert area, and head to Dor, which is another kingdom. Chapter 4 is from Kai's perspective. He reports to Kit, who is going crazy with grief, and they argue because Kit doesn't trust Kai anymore because he knows that Kai used to disobey their father's orders and would spare little kids from being murdered because they were ordinary. Kit wants Peyton brought back to him alive. Chapter 5, Peyton's perspective. Peyton has been walking for days straight, which is impressive because she has like no superpowers, not a lot of supplies, and is wounded. It's one of those things where it's like any kind of like fantasy or even some like action type things, you have to suspend your disbelief of what a human body is like capable of. Even something like not fantastical at all, but something like Die Hard, just some of the shit that he survives or that he can handle. A normal person can't do that. And in like other action movies where they just like get shot and then they're like, oh, it just grazed me, I'm fine, and they can still fight or whatever, that's bullshit. You know, I'm fine with it in general. I'm even like fine with it here, I guess, but it is something that I like, you know, like she's kind of looked down upon and marginalized because she doesn't have superpowers, but also has like superhuman endurance and the ability to cross a desert for days straight with like next to no like supplies and next to no superpowers, whatever, just by sheer force of will. And I get that, you know, it is a nitpick for sure, but I don't know. It's just, I don't like it in most fiction. You know what movie franchise doesn't really do that though is, weirdly enough, it's like Mad Max, where Mad Max like gets really injured in the first one and is still like dealing with that injury in the third one. I don't know where I was going with any of that. Anyways, chapter 6, Kai's perspective. He and a group of soldiers are crossing the Scorch to find Peyton. He dreams of her, and then he broods like the good, edgy shadow boy that he is. Chapter 7, Peyton's perspective. I think she gets stung by a scorpion, or she's like stuck in the desert or something. Anyways, she's dying and a guy finds her and she thinks that it's Kai, and so she plans on how to beat his ass. So she breaks his wrist and threatens him with a knife, only to realize that it's somebody else entirely. And then she's like, whoopsie, my bad, dog, I'm sorry. And the dude recognizes her from wanted posters that are like all over the neighboring kingdoms, all over Ilia, and there's like a really big bounty on her head. So then he cuts her across the chest with a knife, and then he's like, just come along quietly, I don't want to hurt you. And I'm like, dog, you just hurt her, what do you mean? And then Peyton kills a motherfucker. Like, chapter 8, Kai's perspective. He and the team are in the desert. They find the dead body that Peyton left, and they go into the kingdom of Dor. Chapter 9 is Peyton's perspective. She's getting by in Dor just fine, trying to survive, and then she discovers an illegal cage fighting ring. Chapter 10, Kai's perspective. Kai runs into a girl that he banished from Ilia in Dor from Powerless, and she takes him to the same illegal fighting ring. Chapter 11, Peyton's perspective. Peyton wins a cage fighting match and then gets challenged to a fight by Kai, because of course. And in chapter 12, we get a little bit of a change up. We get Kit's perspective. He's going crazy with grief, doesn't really know what to do with himself. He's going crazy with grief, and he talks about how he's jealous of Kai because their dad loved him more, even though their dad like tortured Kai and forced him to kill people as like a child, and a bunch of other really fucked up stuff. Like the more I think about Kit, I'm like, you're really dumb and naive. Chapter 13, we go to Kai's perspective. Peyton runs away, and he chases her, and then Peyton threatens him with a knife. They make a deal to fight in the cage. Then they make out for a little bit. Then they go back to the cage match fighting ring place, fight, and Peyton pulls off his disguise bandana cloak thing. Chapters 14 to 15 are both from Peyton's perspective. The fight continues, and Kai removes Peyton's disguise thing, and now she needs to run and hide because she won't get out of there alive because there's a bounty on her head, and there's a cage match fighting ring full of criminals and shit. Chapter 16, I didn't write down whose perspective this was for some weird reason, but they go to an inn and try to treat Peyton's wound. There's only one bed. Oh no, my heart was not in that. Hold on a sec. Oh no, I'm not a good actor, y'all. That's probably why I never made it in showbiz. Chapter 17, Peyton's perspective, nothing happens. Chapter 18, Kit's perspective again. His slow descent into madness continues. Cousin Andy stops by for a visit. Kit's like, oh, I'm so different now. And I'm just like, ugh, shut up, you loser. Chapters 19 to 23, Kai has Peyton in custody, and they camp in the desert and are ambushed by members of the Resistance. Y'all remember the Resistance? And the Resistance kills like all of Kai's men, so we don't have to worry about them anymore. They go back to Door and meet Lenny's mother, who is running like a refugee shelter place gathering up mixes. I don't love that term, and it's just people with like weaker powers or half powers or whatever. So like instead of being able to shoot fireballs, they can only like light up their thumbs or something like that. And then the guy who ran the illegal cage fighting ring comes and kidnaps Peyton and Kai. Chapter 24 is Kit's perspective. The royal advisor, I think his name is Callum, pays Kit a visit and gives him some advice and a little box, a mystery box. Chapters 25 to 30, Peyton and Kai escape their cell that they're being held into. They jump into a sewer and realize that there is no escape, so they kiss. He tastes like longing. I hate language like this, like, even in poetry, I don't really like it. I was just recently teaching some classes with another poet, and she's all about that kind of language, and I don't really like that kind of like poetry is playing with language. I'm not about to tell someone what they should or shouldn't do, even like when I'm doing reviews like this, beyond pointing out something that's like truly harmful to a marginalized community. I don't really actually like care, like, oh, why would you do that? I'm just like playing it up, you know, because these are slightly semi-comedic reviews. I'm not going to tell someone what they can and can't do, but I really hate being like, it tastes like a thing that doesn't have a taste, you know, like, I can taste the starlight on my tongue. It doesn't make sense to me, because I take things a little, maybe too like literally or whatever, take it too seriously, whatever, it's fine. You into this kind of language, that's fine, do you. I hate it. The only exception is when, y'all ever see Puss in Boots 2? When Death is like, I just love the smell of fear. I just assume that because this character is literal death, he can smell fear because he's death, straight up. Anyways, Peyton realizes that there's a grate above her head, and she tries to move it. Kai helps her get out, but then he almost drowns. Peyton jumps back into the sewer to save him. So as a thank you for saving his life, Kai chains their ankles together. Because, you know, fellas, everybody knows if you got a thing for a fly, honey, you give her jewelry. You know what I'm saying? Again, that's terrible dating advice. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. They break into an inn and take turns bathing and washing their clothes, and Peyton gets really distracted by Kai shirtless. The next morning, they run away from the inn, and they're chased by some soldiers, some thugs, some people who want, I don't know, they're being chased. Then they do the old fake out, make out to avoid being arrested. Chapter 31 is Kit's perspective. Kit continues his journey to Crazy Town. He thinks that Kai has run away with Peyton and mentions Ava, and I still don't know who that is. I do now, but in my notes I didn't. Like, I feel like I figured it out, or I made an assumption, but you can assume whatever you want about where a book's headed, but you only know if you're right until you get to that point of the book. Like, you might know the butler did it, but you still got to get to the end to confirm that the butler did it. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that was classist stuff. I'm sorry to any butlers who might be watching this video. I didn't mean to perpetuate the stereotype that you all kill. That was insensitive of me, and I'm deeply sorry. Chapters 32 to 36, Kai and Peyton are walking towards the Sanctuary of Souls, a bandit territory. They get spotted by thugs, and they chase them. Peyton and Kai hide in a gentleman's club. They win a game, and then they leave. Kai reveals that Ava is, in fact, his younger sister, who was born sick and weak and died when she was 4. They break into a barn and steal a horse, and they ride into the Sanctuary of Souls. They stop to dance together and have another heart-to-heart. Chapter 37, we check in with Kit again. He goes and visits Gail in the kitchen. Gail is the cook lady. I don't know. I don't like that Gail is this mammy-coded character. She's the only black character like in the whole book, and she's just like the cook, the maid who raised the 2 princes instead of their parents. Like, it's perpetuating a lot of stereotypes in a very nothing character, and I don't love that. It's one of those things where it's like, there's been a lot of romantasy that I've read where they do something like this. They're like, oh, I gotta prove I'm not racist, so I gotta add a black woman, and then they just put the black woman character in the most like fucked up unnecessary racist position, and I'm just like, should have just had none. I think that would have been less harmful, honestly. Because, like, Imagine Dragons isn't like, oh man, we got to prove we're not racist and get ourselves a black bandmate and then just put it on maracas, I just think you're better off without one. And that's probably a bad analogy, and that might get me canceled. I don't know. If you're going to put black women in your romantasy, but then put them in a very undignified role or a role that perpetuates stereotypes, just don't. I just think that's better. Also, apparently, Kit's nickname is Kitty. I don't like that, like, at all. Chapters 38 to 41, Kai and Peyton find an oasis or a pond or whatever, and they make out in the pond, and then a storm hits, so they find shelter in a cave. They start a fire with pages from Peyton's dad's journal, and Peyton finds diary entries, which makes sense because it's a fucking journal, claiming that the king's claims about there being a disease are a lie, and she's like, this is proof that the king was lying about ordinaries being diseased. It's not proof. Pretty sure that's circumstantial evidence. I'm not a big city lawyer, but I don't think that's going to hold up. Definitely not in the court of public opinion. She keeps reading and discovers that her father is actually not her biological father and has an identity crisis. It turns out that she was abandoned by ordinaries, and her father raised her as his daughter. I'm just going off script for a second. This isn't in my notes, but I've seen this kind of revelation in stuff before, like in some books, in some movies, TV shows, whatever. And like, as an adoptee, as somebody who was adopted, I always find like the idea that like, that's not my real dad because he's not whatever. Like, I find that kind of, it perpetuates something. It's like people kind of take on this lived experience and they know nothing about. And because that is my lived experience and something that's been a big deal to me in my life, it stings a lot that people kind of perpetuate this idea like adopted people are unwanted or there's something wrong with them because they're adopted or whatever. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, being adopted is great. It's the best thing ever. And I loved every second of it. I didn't. It was tough. I had a pretty rough experience and a pretty tough home life growing up. I won't pretend like I didn't. But I hate it when people who are not adopted or who don't know anybody who's adopted use that shit as tier bait. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my real beef with it. And to be like, oh, he's not my real dad or whatever. And then this dude, this like super privileged prince who's, got his own shit, his own issues, is the one who's like, but he was your father because he wanted to raise you. He wanted to be your father. And he's kinder than my dad ever was. Sorry, I killed him, by the way. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that this was handled well, and it's really poking at a very specific nerve, a very specific wound of mine. I didn't appreciate that. I just think that is kind of an unnecessary detail, especially since the plot goes like, especially since this like will not impact the overall plot at all. Anyways, the next morning they're attacked by bandits. Peyton kills all of them. She feels real bad about it. She's like this, I think it's called hemophobia. Like, she's a fear of blood now. It's probably not called hemophobia. I'm so dumb. I should have looked it up. But she has a panic attack because of all the blood, and there's some blood in her hair, so she makes Kit cut off her hair with a dagger. Chapter 42, Kit's perspective. He visits the queen, Kai's mother, and she reveals that their dad left like letters for Kit in case something happened to him. They'll help him rule the kingdom the way he wanted the kingdom ruled. In chapter 43, Until the End, Kai and Peyton make it out of the Sanctuary of Souls and into a field of poppies before the kingdom. Kai says, I will hate you if you will spend the rest of your life hating me for it. Dude has spoken in white boy spoken word poetry the entire book. That's true. They confess their love for each other, and then Kai's men spot him. Kai asks Peyton to play along, and they arrest Peyton. They take him to the throne room, and Kit proposes to her. And Kai just, like, rolls with that. He's like, yup, nothing weird about that. You know, I've been worried about my brother being crazy this entire book, but he seems fine. I am super jealous, though, and now I'm real sad that there's, like, literally nothing I could do about it, even though I promised her I would get her out of whatever was going to happen next, which in my mind kind of negates the whole declaration of love and any semblance of development Kai could have had during this entire book. Also, Kit, like, you know people think you've gone insane because you won't leave your dad's office, you don't eat, and you're like, oh, no, they think I'm crazy. Well, I'll show them. And then you propose to the woman who killed your dad, who, by the way, you've had, like, 3 conversations with. I'm sure, like, a super fan is going to be, well, actually, they spoke 7 times. Shut up. Yeah, this is not going to help the crazy accusations at all. There's certainly choices. Anyways, that's the end. Moving on to my analysis part of the video. This is where I break down the book into 4 aspects: character, world building, plot, and writing. I just kind of share my thoughts on those different aspects. Starting with characters, one of the things I find so bizarre about these characters is that they are so self-aware. Like, they know how their bodies are moving. They know what they're thinking. They know how they're being perceived by other people. But also, they are incredibly self-unaware, and they don't realize that they want to bang the other main character. And they're all so edgy in their own way. It's insufferable. It's like they're all edgy shadow boos. Except for Kit. He's like a sad boy, and I'm not talking Jarvis Johnson and Jordan Adika. Peyton's like incredibly self-centered in a way that I don't find redeemable or charming. And that's not even like the point of the book. Like, the point of the book isn't, doesn't she suck? Like, and she's also incredibly self-righteous, even though she's super down to steal from other marginalized people in her community because she's so focused on her own survival. Like, that's her like main objective throughout these first 2 books, is just gonna get me and mine. And this character has a lot of trauma, but is very aware of her trauma, but doesn't do anything to work around that trauma, which just doesn't make a ton of sense to me, because it's like, again, they're very aware of their thoughts and feelings, but not aware of what that means or how to do better. And Kai isn't much better. I think that the author was really trying to focus on developing Kai this book. I feel, especially trying to like humanize him or soften him up with like the introduction of his late sister Ava. But I think some of that development is sort of undercut or undone near the end. Struggle between like his feelings for Peyton and his sense of loyalty to his brother is not really described well. You know, it's mostly just him being like, I want to fuck her so bad. And one of my biggest problems with romantasy, like as a genre, is I'm just really sick. I'm really sick and tired of like these possessive, manipulative, toxic men being presented like heartthrobs or whatever. I'm tired of these antiquated gender roles, and I'm tired of the like James Dean bad boy rebel without a cause type shit. Kit's like a really disappointing character in that the author kind of led me to believe that he was gonna be this like cruel, wicked, conniving, cold-hearted villain. And he's just like a sad boy writing poetry in his dad's office the entire book. Like, the descent into madness could have been interesting. We could have seen him become like bloodthirsty, killing ordinaries, hunting down anybody who even has like light blonde hair or something crazy. And we don't get like none of that, homie. It's a real letdown, because this could have been like a chance to make a true villain with real motivations and like real, we saw the villain origin story and we saw why he would be the way that he is. And we didn't get any of that. We just got, I miss my daddy. And it's like, get over it. He was a jackass. He hated you. But I do have to give credit where credit's due. The author is making room for a cisgendered heterosexual man to be sad and insecure and vulnerable in their book. You wouldn't see SJM or Rebecca Yarros do that, so also credit is where credit's due. This author actually knows what enemies to lovers is. Like, these are actual enemies that become lovers, and that's better than Fourth Wing. I mean, the author is pretty heavy-handed with it, and it's really on the nose and won't let you forget that they are enemies right now, but still, it is actual enemies to lovers, and I gotta respect that. Moving on to world building, I don't really think that this expands the world of Powerless all that much. There's no real exploration of the power system beyond the introduction of mixes. The characters go to different kingdoms in this book, and the author shows us how the kingdom of Ilya is perceived outside of its own borders, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it would be interesting if, like, learning how Ilya is perceived outside of its own borders impacted the characters at all. Like, maybe Kai actually has to wrestle with the fact that outside of his own country, not only does he not have powers because his whole power is stealing other people's powers, but, like, maybe he has to reconcile with the fact that he's in service to an imperial sworn allegiance who've been born into serving a colonial imperialist power that everyone hates. And he's not the hero of the story. Like, he already thinks he's a monster because of the things that he has to do. But, like, it would be interesting to see, like, it's not even for the greater good. He's become a monster for nothing. That would be interesting, but they didn't do that, so it's not. But the author didn't do that, so it's not interesting. I also don't even understand how Ilya can be, like, this elite society or this, like, superpower in a political sense if all that really it has is the fact that its citizens can shoot fireballs and teleport, turn into wolves and shit. Doesn't sound like they have a lot of resources or trade or anything. They don't even, like, lend out their soldiers or something. Like, in the I'm not going to point to it. Like, in the Renegades trilogy by Marissa Mayer, like, part of the way that the superheroes make money is by lending out their recruits to other countries or something like that. Which sounds a lot worse than it actually is. It's a pretty chill, low stakes read. I enjoy it immensely. No one wanted me to talk about it, so I never did. But hey, if you like My Hero Academia, you might like Renegades. It's not nearly as good as My Hero Academia, but it's pretty good. I will say that one part of the world building, or maybe this is part of the plot, I don't know, but, like, the fact that we weren't in Ilya and there weren't a lot of people with magic powers in the book was really nice, because then we didn't have to hear terms like brawny and blink and shit like that. Moving on to plot, this feels very Pirates of the Caribbean 2. It feels like 400 pages or 12 hours of setup. It's like half of the second part of a story, you know what I'm saying? Like, I get that trilogies probably bring in more money or whatever because there's more product. Yo, publishing, duologies are cool too, because it feels like a lot of book twos in series are stretched out to be book twos, but there just isn't enough plot substance to be a trilogy and not give us, like, what some people might call the Miyazaki wall. This whole book is a Miyazaki wall. A duology that I think bangs is the Bonesmith duology. That shit's so good. I love that duology. It's so much fun. I hated the first one until I read the second one. Then I was like, no, this shit's tight. This is great. Also, I think the Vampire Hunter book, Silver Under Moonlight, by Rin Shipeko, is also just a duology, and that's pretty dope. I don't know. I haven't read the second one. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I might be lying. But yeah, duology slap. You should do more of those because there's not enough happening in this book to justify it being a book on its own, especially since a lot of the plot points kind of recycle themselves. Like the fact that we ended up with only one bed and like a lot of cuddling and introspection, it was so boring. Man, if all you want is cuddling and introspection and like, I hate you, but God, you're so sexy, then you're in luck. This is all this book is. There's 400 pages of it. Enjoy. But for me, I found it incredibly dull, and I kept waiting for the plot to really kick in and for Kit to like step in as a true villain, and it just like didn't happen. And lastly, let's talk about the writing. Like I said before, this is some of the most jarring prose I've ever read because it's written in the first person in present tense. But it's written in a way that would be better suited for third person. Like having a singular omniscient narrator instead of it being dual POV would probably fix my biggest issue with it. But it's like when a character goes like, my eyes flit around the room, or or my gaze washes over her, or some nonsense like that, it just makes it feel like the characters are watching themselves participate in the story. So I'm just being told what the characters. It's very jarring, and it feels like the characters don't have agency. It's just like it fucks up the flow. I think it fucks up the flow for me. And there's a part in the book where Peyton's talking about like sneaking around, and she's talking about how she's like being seen, she melds with the shadows or some shit. And I'm like, you don't actually know that. Like, you know, it's the fact that these characters are also incredibly conceited about their own skills at like fighting and being stealthy and shit. It just makes it really corny, and it really highlights how edgy they think they are. And it is kind of like all the characters are. This is a very Tumblr coded book. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like this is like emo power fantasy. No offense to any emos out there. I love y'all. We all know like those posers. You know, the ones that aren't really about it and they're like really over the top with it. It's that. And this prose isn't even like pretty purple prose. This is so poetic, it's annoying. Kai constantly self-reflects like he's doing slam poetry. And I'm a slam poet. Like, I compete in slams and shit. And there's like a bunch of alliteration and stuff that like I get this is meant to make the writing prettier or more beautiful or something like that. But it's just, I don't know, it's a lot. It is overly, like, y'all ever add salt to your food and then the salt shaker breaks so you end up with like more salt than actual food? That's what happened here with poetry. I don't like it. I know that I've said that I really like, you know, poetic lyrical prose, but not like this. Not like this. To be honest, I finished this book and I didn't hate it nearly as much as I hated A Night and Its Moon by Piper C.J. So originally I was like, I think this is better. I feel like, you know, I think I gave Powerless like 1.5 or 1.75, somewhere in there. So Reckless gets about the same. It's a very Kraft Singles ass, grilled cheese ass book. But hey, if that's what you're into, bon appetit. And that's just my opinion. If you love this book, if this is your favorite book, that's cool too. I hope you enjoy the third one. I won't. Probably have to read it and review it because people seem to like it when I talk about this series. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my super duper don't fretters, Lauren, Desi, Shade, Cassie, and Oliver. You are helping to ensure I'm able to create content and put it out as frequently as possible. If you also want to help support the channel, gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, gain access to my private Discord server where you can chat with me, a bunch of other lovely people, and participate in a monthly book club, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/don'tfret_. If not, no worries, but please, before you go, for me. Like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Thank you again so much for watching. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.